She told them to leave, not quietly, not politely. Naomi stands on the road back to Bethlehem and releases both of her daughters-in-law with a blessing and a command. Go back. Go home. You've done enough. The men are dead. The money is gone. I have nothing left to give you and no future left to offer. Go. Orpah goes. And nobody blames her. Ruth stays. And what she does next is one of the most psychologically complex acts in all of Scripture. Not because it was loving, but because it made absolutely no rational sense. Before we get to Ruth's decision, we have to sit with Naomi for a moment. Because what Naomi does first is the thing most people in your life will do before they push you away. She renames herself. Naomi means pleasant. She tells the women of Bethlehem, "Call me Mara. Call me bitter." She is not being poetic. She is announcing a psychological collapse in real time. The woman they knew is gone. What came back from Moab is grief wearing her face, and grief has a new name, and the new name is a warning. This is what extreme loss does to a person's identity. It doesn't just hurt them, it rewrites them. Naomi isn't performing bitterness. She is bitterness, all the way down, and she is telling everyone who approaches exactly what they will find if they get close. Most people, when someone reconfigures their entire personality around pain, take that as a signal to maintain distance, and they are not wrong to feel that instinct. A person who has decided they are Mara is a person who will drain your emotional reserves without being able to replenish them. That is not cruelty. That is the neurological reality of severe grief. The capacity for reciprocity goes offline. Orpah's decision is the rational one. She processes the situation, weighs the odds, and returns to a place where her chances of survival and belonging are statistically better. She is not a villain. She is a sensible person reading a situation correctly. Ruth reads the exact same situation and makes the opposite choice. We quote Ruth 1:16 at weddings. We cross-stitch it onto pillows. Where you go, I will go. Where you die, I will die. We have domesticated it into sentiment. But read what Ruth is actually saying. She is a Moabite woman in the ancient Near East. She has a homeland, a language, a culture, a pantheon of familiar gods, and a statistical chance of remarrying within her own community. She is surrendering every single one of those things. Not as a temporary sacrifice, permanently. She is not saying, I will stay with you until things improve. She is saying, I am fusing my future to yours regardless of whether things ever improve. Psychologists call this identity fusion, the point at which a person stops calculating their own survival as separate from another person's survival. It is not codependency, though it looks like it from the outside. Codependency is motivated by fear of abandonment. Identity fusion is motivated by something closer to ontological commitment, the sense that who you are is now inseparable from who they are, and severing the relationship would not free you. It would fragment you. Ruth is not staying because she needs Naomi. She is staying because leaving would require her to become a version of herself she cannot recognize. That distinction matters enormously, and most people never stop long enough to figure out which one is driving their loyalty. Here is the thing about shared grief that neuroscience has only recently started to articulate clearly. The most powerful form of support during acute loss is not provision. It is not problem solving. It is not redirection toward hope. It is witness. Naomi did not need Ruth to fix anything. Nothing was fixable. The husbands were dead. The economic situation was dire. No amount of resourcefulness was going to reverse what had already happened. What Naomi needed was someone willing to remain present while she was unpleasant to be around. Someone who would not flinch at the bitterness, would not try to argue her out of the name Mara, would not vanish when the grief made her difficult. Ruth becomes that presence. She is not a therapist. She is not a financial solution. She is a mirror. Someone who refuses to sanitize the pain by leaving it, which is what most people do. Most people leave because they cannot tolerate watching someone they love suffer without being able to stop it. Ruth tolerates it. She walks into Bethlehem beside a woman who has publicly announced her own desolation. That takes more psychological strength than optimism. Optimism says things will get better. What Ruth demonstrates is something rarer, the capacity to stay fully present even when there is no evidence that they will. Before we go further, if you have ever been the Ruth in someone's story, or if you have ever been the Naomi, drop it in the comments. Tell me which one you've had to be. And if this kind of content speaks to something in you, subscribe. We open up scripture like this every single week, and we are just getting started. Now let's be honest about what Ruth is walking into. She is a Moabite woman entering Israelite society. In that cultural context, she is not just a foreigner, she is the wrong kind of foreigner. Moab had a complicated and hostile history with Israel. Ruth does not have the privilege of anonymity. She cannot blend in. The moment she opens her mouth, her accent identifies her. The moment she enters the fields to glean, she is the most vulnerable person in that economy. A foreign widow with no male protector in a system that could exploit her with no consequences. She knows this. Naomi knows this. And Ruth goes anyway. This is where society consistently misreads radical loyalty as weakness. It is not weakness. It is the most calculated act of defiance in the book. Ruth looks at a hostile culture, an uncertain future, a broken mentor who cannot protect her, and she decides that her integrity, the commitment she made, the person she chose, is worth more than the safety of retreat. That is not weakness. That is someone who has decided what they are made of. There is a version of self-preservation that is just cowardice with better branding. Ruth refuses it. Not because she is reckless, but because she understands something about herself that most people spend their entire lives trying to figure out. She knows her own floor. Watch what happens when they arrive in Bethlehem. Naomi is still Mara. She has not recovered. The bitterness is still fully operational. But Ruth does not wait for Naomi to heal before she starts building. She goes to the fields the next morning, and she works. This is the part of the story nobody emphasizes enough. Ruth does not stand over Naomi waiting for gratitude or reciprocity or signs of improvement. She labors in the margins of an economy that barely tolerates her presence, and she brings home what she earns. Every single day. And something extraordinary begins to happen. Not immediately, not dramatically, but slowly, the weight of Ruth's loyalty starts to pull Naomi back toward the surface. There is a moment, you can feel it shift in the text, when Naomi stops calling herself Mara in her actions, even if not yet in her words, when she starts thinking strategically again, when she looks at Boaz and begins to see possibility where before she only saw absence. Ruth's loyalty did not fix Naomi's grief. It created a container stable enough for Naomi to eventually fix it herself. That is the real architecture of deep relationship, not rescuing someone from their darkness, remaining present and functional long enough that they find their own way back to the light. The strongest bonds in human experience are not formed in shared celebration. They are forged in the refusal to exit when the world ends. Joy bonds people temporarily. Suffering, survived together, witnessed honestly, never sanitized, that binds people permanently. Ruth and Naomi do not end up in the lineage of David because everything worked out. They end up there because one woman decided her commitment was more durable than her circumstances. You will meet your Naomi. You may already be one. The question the book of Ruth is asking, the question it has been asking for 3,000 years, is not whether loyalty is rational. It is whether you know your own floor. If this opens something up for you, share it with someone who is currently in a Naomi season, someone who has gone quiet, who changed, who is harder to be around than they used to be. They may need to know someone is still choosing to stay. Subscribe for more, and we will see you in the next one.